He went to take trash out of the river, but froze when he saw what was inside the yellow bag. Dennis Harper never imagined that Friday afternoon would completely change the course of his life. He had worked for 15 years as a sanitation worker for the city of Cedar Falls, a small town in southern Iowa, and was used to removing all kinds of trash from the river that ran through the town. That's when he saw the yellow plastic bag stuck among the rocks on the riverbank. The object swayed back and forth with the current, as if trying to get his attention. Dennis wore his faded purple work shirt, worn by the sun and time, and his dark hair stuck to his forehead because of the intense heat of that summer afternoon. "More trash thrown around," he murmured to himself as he carefully approached the slippery rocks. Kneeling on the rocky riverbank, Dennis reached out his arm to grab the bag. The icy water of the current wet his fingers as he tried to pull the object. There was something heavy inside, but it didn't seem like the usual trash he was used to collecting. With a firm motion, he managed to bring the bag to the bank. It was soaked and had a strange smell, like paper that had been wet for a long time. Dennis hesitated for a moment before opening it. In all those years of work, he had learned you never knew what people threw in rivers. When he finally untied the knot that sealed the bag, his hands trembled. Inside were dozens of handwritten letters, all wet with slightly smudged ink but still legible. What made him freeze wasn't just finding letters inside a trash bag. It was reading the name on the envelope of the first letter. To Dennis Harper, 247 Blossom Street, Cedar Falls. His own name, his old address. The address of the house he lived in 25 years ago when he was still married to Jennifer. With a racing heart, he picked up another envelope, then another. All addressed to him, all with old dates from the 1990s, all signed by a person he hadn't seen in over 20 years, Jennifer Collins Harper, his first wife. Dennis sat down heavily on a large rock on the riverbank. The letters dripped water between his trembling fingers as he tried to understand how this was possible. Jennifer had disappeared from his life without any explanation in 1998. She simply took her clothes and left, leaving only a short note saying things weren't working out between them anymore. He had tried to look for her for months. He asked friends, family, neighbors. No one knew where she had gone. After 2 years of waiting, Dennis finally accepted a default divorce and rebuilt his life. He married again to Susan, a good and caring woman he met at church, and they had 2 children together. But there were the letters, dozens of them, all written by the woman he believed had simply abandoned him without looking back. The first letter he managed to read completely was dated March 1999, just 4 months after she had left. "My dear Dennis, I've been trying to talk to you for so long. I don't know if my letters are getting there because you never answer me. I know you must be very angry with me, and you have every right to be, but you need to understand what really happened that night." Dennis stopped reading. What night? What event was she mentioning? He vaguely remembered a silly argument about money in the last week they were together, but nothing that justified such a drastic separation. He continued reading. "I saw you with that woman downtown, Dennis. I saw you hugging in front of the bank. When I got home and asked, you said you hadn't left the house all day. You lied to my face, looking into my eyes. That's what made me leave. Not the betrayal itself, but the lie." Dennis Harper's world stopped. He remembered that day perfectly. He had met Rachel, a distant cousin of Susan, whom he barely knew at the time, and she was crying in the street because she had fought with her boyfriend. He had merely comforted her with a brotherly hug and offered a friendly shoulder. When he got home, Jennifer asked where he had been, but he was so preoccupied with some problems at work that he answered distractedly, not even remembering the chance encounter. To Jennifer, it had seemed like a deliberate betrayal followed by a brazen lie. "I'm staying at Aunt Beatrice's house in Waterloo. I hope you can forgive me and that we can talk. You can write to me at the address on the envelope. I love you, I always have." Dennis looked at the damp envelope. The return address was almost illegible, but the letters could still be made out. Waterloo, a city just 50 kilometers away. He picked up the second letter, dated June of the same year. "Dennis, I don't know why you aren't answering my letters. Are they even getting to you? I asked Linda at the bakery when I visited Cedar Falls last month, and she said you still live in the same house. So the letters should be arriving. The third letter, from September, had a more desperate tone. "My love, please give me a chance to explain. I know I was wrong to leave without talking first, but I was so hurt. Please write to me, even if it's just a line saying you're okay." Dennis felt a pain in his chest he hadn't felt in decades. How had he never received these letters? He lived at the same address back then. The mailman was always the same, Mr. Walter, who knew everyone on the street. He picked up a few more letters, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. The tone grew progressively sadder, more desperate. In the seventh letter, dated December 1999, Jennifer wrote, "Perhaps you are right not to answer me. Perhaps I have forever lost the right to be your wife. But I wanted you to know that I never stopped loving you. Even hurt, even far away, you remain the only man I have ever truly loved in my life." Dennis's tears began to fall onto the damp paper. 25 years later, he discovered that the woman he loved had not abandoned him for lack of love, but because of a terrible misunderstanding, and that she had tried to reconcile with him for years. He continued reading the letters in chronological order. They continued until 2003, each more painful than the last. In the second to last one, Jennifer wrote that she had met another man, but that she was only trying to move on because she believed Dennis had completely forgotten her. "I am marrying Kenneth next month. He is a good man, but you know he will never be you. I hope you are happy wherever you are, with whomever you have chosen to share your life." The last letter was dated April 2004. "This is my last attempt, Dennis. I'm pregnant with Kenneth's child. We are moving to Cedar Rapids, where he got a better job. I wanted to tell you in person, but since you never answered me, at least I want you to hear it from me. Thank you for the happy years we had. Thank you for being the great love of my life, even though I ruined everything." Dennis let the letter fall onto the stony ground and put his head in his hands. How had those letters ended up in that river? Why had he never received them? And why were they appearing now after so long? The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky orange and pink, but Dennis barely noticed the beauty of the twilight. His mind was racing with questions and an overwhelming guilt. While he thought Jennifer had coldly abandoned him, she was suffering kilometers away, writing letters that never reached their destination. He carefully gathered all the letters and placed them back in the plastic bag. He needed to get home, dry the papers properly, and read everything more calmly, but most of all, he needed to understand how that had happened. During the drive back home, Dennis could hardly pay attention to the traffic. His mind kept returning to Jennifer's face, her always cheerful brown eyes, her curly hair that she would pin up with a blue clip when she was cooking. They had met at the church's summer festival in 1995. Jennifer was an elementary school teacher and had just moved to Cedar Falls to work at the public school. Dennis, then 28, worked at the same urban sanitation company, but only as an assistant. The courtship was quick and intense. In 6 months, they were living together, and in a year they got married in a simple but love-filled ceremony. It was 2.5 years of almost complete happiness, with some silly fights like every couple has, but nothing that seemed to threaten the relationship. Until that last week, when everything fell apart without him understanding why. Arriving home, a simple but well-kept house in the Riverside neighborhood, Dennis found Susan preparing dinner. She smiled when she saw him, as she had done for almost 20 years. "You're late today," she commented without a tone of accusation. "Did something happen at work?" Dennis hesitated. How to explain to his wife that he had found letters from his ex-wife revealing that everything he believed about the past was wrong? "It was a tough day," he replied evasively. "I'm going to take a shower before dinner." Susan nodded and returned to the stove. She was an understanding woman who rarely asked too many questions. She was the exact opposite of Jennifer, who always wanted to know everything, be part of everything, talk about everything. At the time, that sometimes annoyed Dennis. Today, he realized he missed that intensity. In the bathroom, as the hot water fell on his tired shoulders, Dennis tried to put his thoughts in order. He needed to figure out how the letters ended up in that river. But most of all, he needed to decide whether he would look for Jennifer to tell her about the discovery. Did she still live in Cedar Rapids? Was she still married to that Kenneth? Did she have children? How would she react upon learning the letters never reached him? And Susan. How to explain to his devoted wife of the last 20 years that he was thinking about his ex-wife. Not that he wanted to betray Susan or leave her, but he needed to resolve that situation if only for peace of mind. After dinner, Dennis said he needed to go to the backyard to check on some plants. Susan thought it was odd because he had never shown an interest in gardening, but she didn't question it. In the shed out back where he kept his work tools, Dennis carefully spread the letters out on the old wooden workbench. He used a small fan to dry the papers better and a magnifying glass he used for small repairs to read the more smudged parts. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. He read each letter again, this time paying attention to details he had missed in the first reading. In one of them, Jennifer mentioned that she had asked the mailman if the letters were being delivered, and he had assured her they were. In another, she said she had called the house a few days after sending a particularly important letter, but someone had said Dennis wasn't there and didn't know when he'd be back. Someone was intercepting the correspondence. But who? And why? Dennis thought of all the people who had access to his house back then. Susan wasn't part of his life yet. His parents lived in another city. That left few options. The mailman, Mr. Walter, who had always been an honest person, or his mother. Mrs. Dorothy used to visit Dennis twice a week after Jennifer left. She always arrived in the morning and stayed until late afternoon, tidying the house, cooking meals, tending to the plants. She had the keys to the house and knew all the mailman's habits. More importantly, she had never liked Jennifer. Since they were dating, Mrs. Dorothy would make subtle remarks about how Jennifer was too stuck up for her son, how she was too educated, and surely thought she was superior to his family. When they got married, she complained that her daughter-in-law didn't visit her enough, didn't cook the dishes Dennis liked, didn't behave as a wife should. In the week before the separation, Mrs. Dorothy had made particularly sharp comments about the marriage. She said it was time for Dennis to open his eyes to the kind of woman he had married. At the time, Dennis didn't pay much attention. He thought it was just the typical mother-in-law, jealous of losing her son. But now, with the letters in his hands, he began to suspect his mother's interference had been more direct than he imagined. The problem was that Mrs. Dorothy had passed away 3 years ago, a victim of diabetes complications. She took to the grave any secret she might have had about the letters. Or perhaps not. Dennis remembered that after his mother's passing, he and Susan had cleaned out her house to sell it. Mrs. Dorothy was a person who kept everything. Old receipts, old newspapers, letters, photographs. They had donated several boxes of old papers to a thrift store downtown, but kept some things that seemed to have sentimental value. Those boxes were stored in the attic of his current house. Dennis looked at the clock. It was almost 10 at night. Susan was probably already asleep, tired from her day's work sewing. It was the perfect time to investigate the attic without raising suspicion. He quietly climbed the creaking stairs that led to the small attic of the house. With a flashlight, he searched among dusty boxes until he found the ones containing Mrs. Dorothy's belongings. The first box had only old clothes and some worthless costume jewelry. The second contained family documents. Birth certificates, marriage license, death certificate of Dennis's father. The third was full of old family photographs. It was in the fourth box that Dennis found what he was looking for, or rather, what he did not want to find. At the bottom of the box, wrapped in a floral print cloth handkerchief he recognized as his mother's, was another bundle of letters. Letters identical to the ones he had found in the river. With trembling hands, Dennis unwrapped the handkerchief. There were at least 30 letters there, all addressed to him, all sent by Jennifer, all with their seals broken. His mother had intercepted and kept every attempt at reconciliation from his ex-wife. Among the letters, there was a sheet of paper with Mrs. Dorothy's unmistakable handwriting, a letter she had written but apparently never sent. To my son Dennis, I hope you never need to read this letter, but if you are reading it, it's because you discovered what I did with Jennifer's letters. I know you will be angry with me, but I did it for your own good. That woman was no good for you, my son. She was too proud, thought she knew more than everyone else. When she left, I saw an opportunity for you to find a better woman, a woman who truly knew your worth, The letters she sent would only make you suffer more. She wanted to come back not because she loved you, but because she couldn't get the life she wanted away from here. You deserved better. When you met Susan, I was sure I had done the right thing. Susan truly loves you, takes care of you, respects you. That is what a wife should do. I burned some letters but kept others in case you ever questioned it. If you are reading this, you should know I never regretted what I did. I did it out of a mother's love. Your mother who loves you, Dorothy. Dennis felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. His own mother had deliberately destroyed his chance at reconciliation with Jennifer. She had manipulated his life based on prejudice and jealousy. Worse yet, she was right about one thing. Susan truly was a dedicated and loving wife. He had built a good life with her, a solid family. Discovering the truth about Jennifer now wouldn't change the fact that he had found happiness again, but it changed everything about how he saw his own past. Dennis spent the rest of the night reading the letters his mother had intercepted. They were even more painful than the first ones because they showed the evolution of Jennifer's despair over the years. Some were written on special days, their wedding anniversary, Christmas, his birthday, where she poured her heart out about how she missed the life they had together. In a letter from December 2001, she wrote, "It's been 3 years since we separated today, Dennis. 3 years I've been trying to understand where we went wrong. I know I saw you with that woman. I know you lied about where you were. But maybe I should have given you a chance to explain yourself before I left. Maybe the fault wasn't yours alone." In another, from March 2002, "I dreamed of you last night. We were in our kitchen. You were drinking coffee and reading the paper like you always did before work. I woke up crying. I don't know if these dreams are a blessing or a curse." The most devastating letter was dated January 2003. "Dennis, today marks 2 years of me trying to reach you through these letters. 2 years without a response, without a sign that you're even receiving them. I think I finally understand the message. You've moved on, and I should do the same. Kenneth asked me to marry him yesterday. He is a good, patient man, who knows I don't love him as I loved you, but is willing to give me time. I will accept, because I can't spend the rest of my life waiting for someone who has made it clear he doesn't want me back. But I want you to know one thing. Even marrying another, you will always be the love of my life. Always." Dennis folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. The weight of guilt was almost unbearable, even knowing the fault wasn't his, but his mother's. For years he had thought of Jennifer as the woman who had cowardly abandoned him. Now he discovered she had fought for reconciliation much longer than he had ever fought for anything in his life. When the sun rose, Dennis was still in the attic, surrounded by letters and memories. He heard Susan moving around downstairs, preparing coffee as she had done every day for 2 decades. He went down the stairs quietly and sat at the kitchen table. Susan immediately noticed something was wrong. "Didn't you sleep?" she asked with genuine concern. "Not much," answered Dennis, avoiding his wife's gaze. "Did something happen? You look terrible." Dennis took a deep breath. Susan deserved to know the truth, or at least part of it. He told her about the bag of letters found in the river, about how he had discovered his mother had intercepted correspondence from his ex-wife. "My God," whispered Susan, sitting down heavily in the chair beside him. "Mrs. Dorothy really did that?" "The evidence is upstairs," confirmed Dennis. "Dozens of letters that never reached me." Susan was silent for a long moment, processing the information. "And now?" she finally asked. "What are you going to do?" It was the question Dennis had been avoiding asking himself since the discovery. "I don't know," he admitted. "Part of me thinks I should look for her, tell her about the letters, apologize for the misunderstanding. But another part thinks it would be cruel to stir up the past after so long." "And there's a third part you're not talking about," said Susan, with the wisdom of someone who had known her husband for decades. "The part that wants to see her again, not just to apologize." Dennis looked at Susan with surprise. Even after 20 years of marriage, she still surprised him with her perception. "I love you, Susan," he said sincerely. "Our family, our children, the life we built together, none of that has changed." "But you still love her too," Susan finished. It wasn't a question. Dennis couldn't deny it. Susan nodded, as if expecting the confirmation. 20 years ago, when we met, I knew I was competing with a ghost, she said calmly. You talked about Jennifer as if she were the villain who had destroyed your life, but I saw in your eyes that you still loved her. I thought with time it would fade. And it did, protested Dennis. I built a new life. I was happy with you. Happy, yes. But there was always a part of your heart that was kept, locked away. A part you could never fully give to me because it still belonged to her. Susan's words were like knives in Dennis's chest, because they were true. Even in the happiest moments of the marriage, there was always a shadow, an unconscious comparison, a feeling that something was missing. What do you think I should do? He asked. Susan stood up and poured coffee for both of them, as if it were a normal day. When she sat down again, she had a serene expression on her face. I think you should look for her, she said. Not to betray me or abandon our family, but to finally close this wound that never healed properly. You deserve to know how she is, and she deserves to know the truth about the letters. And if that changes everything between us? Maybe it will, admitted Susan, but living with this doubt for the rest of our lives would be worse. For both of us. Dennis took his wife's hand and kissed it gently. How can you be so strong, so understanding? Because I love you, Susan answered simply, and because I know you can't build happiness on lies and secrets. If our family is truly strong, it will survive the truth. If it isn't, it's better we find out now. That afternoon, Dennis called a cousin who lived in Cedar Rapids. He explained he was trying to locate an old acquaintance from Cedar Falls and asked for help finding her. Jennifer Collins, repeated the cousin. Hold on, that name sounds familiar. I think I know her husband, Kenneth. He works at a metalworks factory downtown. Dennis's heart raced. After so many years, locating her would be easier than he imagined. Do you have his phone number or address? Not off the top of my head, but I can find out. Kenneth Walker, if it's the person I'm thinking of. I'll make a few calls and get back to you. 2 hours later, the cousin called back with detailed information. Kenneth Walker was indeed married to Jennifer. They lived in a residential neighborhood in Cedar Rapids and had 2 teenage children. The cousin had managed to get not only the phone number, but also the address. Dennis wrote everything down carefully, but felt his stomach churn at the thought of the next step. How do you call a married woman's house after 25 years to talk about letters that never arrived? He decided a phone conversation would be inadequate for such a delicate matter. On Saturday morning, he borrowed the neighbor's car, his own was in the shop, and drove to Cedar Rapids. The 50-kilometer trip had never seemed so long. Dennis rehearsed mentally what he would say, how he would explain his presence there, how he would broach the subject of the letters. Nothing he thought of sounded natural or appropriate. The address corresponded to a simple but well-kept house in a middle-class neighborhood. There was a small car in the garage and laundry hanging in the yard. A normal domestic scene that suddenly became intimidating to Dennis. He stood on the street for almost half an hour, gathering the courage to ring the doorbell. Finally, when he was almost ready to give up and go home, the front door opened. A woman came out to collect the mail from the mailbox. It was Jennifer, 25 years older, with graying hair pulled into a low bun, some wrinkles around her eyes, a little fuller. But it was unmistakably her. The same brown eyes, the same way of tilting her head when she was focused, the same gentle smile he saw in occasional dreams. Jennifer looked toward the car and seemed to hesitate. Dennis got out of the vehicle slowly, as if any sudden movement could make her disappear. Jennifer, he called softly. She turned completely and stared at him for a long moment, as if seeing a ghost. Dennis? Her voice came out shaky, almost inaudible. They stood still, looking at each other across the yards, separating the sidewalk from the house door. 25 years of silence, hurt, and misunderstanding hung in the air between them. I need to talk to you, Dennis finally said. It's about something important, something I discovered about our separation. Jennifer glanced quickly inside the house, then back at him. She was visibly agitated. My family is home, she said. It's not appropriate for you to be here. Please, Dennis insisted. Just 10 minutes. It's about letters you sent me that I never received. Jennifer's expression changed instantly. Panic gave way to confusion, then to curiosity. "What letters?" she asked, taking a few steps closer. Dennis pulled from his pocket one of the letters he had found in the river. It was still yellowed and slightly water-damaged, but it was clearly written in her hand. "This one is dated December 1999, he said, holding out the envelope. "You wrote asking us to talk, saying you loved me. I never got it. I never got any of the letters you sent." Jennifer took the letter with trembling hands and examined it. Her tears began to fall as she recognized her own handwriting. Where did you find this?" "It's a long story," Dennis replied. "A story you deserve to hear in full." Jennifer looked again at the house where the sound of the television and voices talking could be heard. "There's a square 2 blocks from here," she said finally. "Meet me there in 20 minutes. I'll make up an excuse to go out." Dennis nodded and returned to his car, his heart pounding as if he were running a marathon. At the square, he sat on a bench under a large tree and tried to organize his thoughts. How to explain 25 years of misunderstandings in one conversation, how to justify being there, married to someone else, stirring up a past that should have been buried. Jennifer arrived promptly, wearing a light jacket over her house clothes. She sat on the bench beside him, leaving a respectful space between them. "Tell me this story," she said with the same direct voice he remembered. Dennis took a deep breath and started from the beginning. He told her about the work at the river, about the yellow bag, about the wet letters. He spoke about his initial confusion, about how he had never understood why she had left him so suddenly. "You said you saw me with a woman," he recalled. "That I lied when you asked where I had been." "I did see you," Jennifer confirmed. "In front of the central bank. You were hugging. You were comforting her. When I got home and asked where you had spent the afternoon, you said you had stayed home watching television." "It was Rachel," said Dennis. "A distant cousin of Susan's, someone I barely even knew back then. She was crying on the street because she had fought with her boyfriend. I was just offering a friendly shoulder. When you asked, I was worried about problems at work and didn't even remember the encounter." Jennifer closed her eyes and shook her head. "A misunderstanding," she murmured. "Our entire lives changed because of a misunderstanding." "I still think you should have talked to me before leaving," said Dennis softly. "But I understand why you were hurt. I was young, proud. I thought if you were capable of lying about one thing, you were capable of lying about anything. And when you never answered my letters, I thought I was right." Dennis then told her about the discovery in the attic, about the letters intercepted by his mother, about Mrs. Dorothy's posthumous confession. Jennifer listened in silence, sometimes shaking her head in disbelief. "She really did that?" she asked at the end. "She stole our letters, kept some, burned others. She sincerely believed she was protecting me from you." "Wow," sighed Jennifer. "All these years I thought you had deliberately rejected me, that you were ignoring my pleas for reconciliation out of pure cruelty, and I thought you had abandoned me without a shred of remorse." They were silent for a few minutes, absorbing the weight of the revelations. "How has your life been?" asked Dennis finally. "Good," replied Jennifer, but without much conviction. "Kenneth is a good man, dedicated, hard-working, a present father. We have 2 wonderful children, Brandon, who's 17, and Emily, who's 15. A stable life. But," Jennifer smiled sadly, "you were always good at reading between the lines. Kenneth knows I never loved him the way I loved you. He accepted that, thought that with time I would learn to love him that way. 20 years have passed and I'm still trying. And you? How has your life been?" Dennis talked about Susan, about their children, Ryan and Ashley, about how he had built a solid and happy family. But he also admitted that there was always a shadow of the past hanging over his happiness. "Susan knows you still love me," said Jennifer. "It wasn't a question." "She knows," confirmed Dennis, "and she was the one who encouraged me to look for you, said I needed to close this wound to be completely happy. She is a wise woman. She is an incredible woman, just as Kenneth seems to be an incredible man. We both were lucky to find good people to share our lives with. But they weren't the right people, were they?" Dennis didn't answer because he didn't need to. They both knew the answer. "What do we do now?" asked Jennifer. "Now that we know the truth?" I don't know, admitted Dennis. Part of me wants to scream that we wasted 25 years because of a third person's interference, that we could have been happy together if things had been different. And the other part knows we built new lives, raised other people who depend on us, made commitments we can't break lightly. Jennifer nodded. That's exactly how I feel. The sun was beginning to set when they finally said goodbye that afternoon. They arranged to meet again the following week just to talk, to finish processing the discovery of the letters. I won't lie, said Jennifer before leaving. Part of me always hoped you would show up one day to take me away, even after I was married, even after the children. And part of me always imagined what our life would have been like if you hadn't left, replied Dennis. During the drive back to Cedar Falls, Dennis felt torn between relief and anguish. Relief at finally knowing the truth about the past, anguish at discovering that all the scenarios he had imagined about reconciling with Jennifer were still possible. Susan was waiting for him in the kitchen when he got home. She didn't ask questions, just served dinner, and they talked about everyday matters. But Dennis felt the weight of his wife's attentive gaze, as if she were trying to decipher how the meeting had affected him. On Monday, Dennis returned to work with his mind racing. He couldn't focus on his routine tasks. His colleagues noticed his distraction, but he justified it by saying he hadn't been sleeping well. On Wednesday, he received a phone call at work. It was Jennifer. I need to talk to you, she said, her voice tense. Kenneth found out about our meeting. Dennis's stomach tightened. How? A neighbor saw us talking in the square. She gossiped to another neighbor who told her sister, who is friends with Kenneth's wife's friend. You know how a small town works. What did he say? He's furious. He wants to know why I lied about where I was going, why I secretly met with my ex-husband. I don't know how to explain without telling him about the letters, and I don't know if I should tell him about the letters. Where are you calling from? From work. I've started giving private lessons to teenagers again nearby. Kenneth is saying that if I see you again, he will file for separation. Dennis fell silent, trying to process the information. And your children? Do they know? Brandon suspects something is going on. Emily hasn't noticed anything yet, but if Kenneth and I start fighting seriously, they will suffer. Maybe it's better if we stop right here, suggested Dennis, although the words hurt as he said them. We've already cleared up the misunderstanding from the past. Maybe that's enough. Maybe, agreed Jennifer, but her voice suggested she thought otherwise. Jennifer, it's not that I don't want to see you again, it's that I don't want to destroy your family. I know, she said softly, but it's hard to give up after finding out I was right all these years, that you didn't reject me out of malice. After hanging up the phone, Dennis spent the rest of the day in a state of agitation. It wasn't fair to Jennifer to abandon her again, now that she knew the truth. But it also wasn't fair to Susan or her family to continue a contact that was clearly causing problems. That night, Susan immediately noticed something was wrong. Did she call you? She asked directly. Dennis told her about the call, about her husband's discovery, about the threat of separation. And now what does she want you to do? Leave your family so you can be together? No, Dennis answered honestly. Actually, she suggested we stop seeing each other, but you don't want to stop. Susan, I love you. Our family is the most important thing in my life, but I have to admit that seeing Jennifer again stirred something in me that I didn't expect. Stirred what? Dennis hesitated. How to explain that seeing Jennifer again had awakened feelings he thought he had buried decades ago? How to admit that for the first time in 20 years he was questioning whether he had made the right choices in life? It's as if a part of me that was asleep has woken up, he finally said. A part I didn't even know still existed. Susan sat down heavily on the living room sofa. For a long moment, she just stared at her own hands. I always knew this day would come, she finally said. Ever since we got married, I always knew that if you ever met her again, you would have to choose between us. Susan, it's not that simple, isn't it? She interrupted him. Dennis, you may love me. You may love our children. You may have built a good life with me. But she is the love of your life, isn't she? She always has been. Dennis couldn't deny it. The words stuck in his throat, but Susan read the answer in his eyes. "What do you want me to do?" he asked in despair. "Do you want me to destroy two families because of feelings from the past?" "I want you to be honest," replied Susan. "With me, with yourself, with her. Because living a lie isn't good for anyone." That night Dennis could barely sleep. He lay staring at the ceiling, listening to Susan's steady breathing beside him, thinking of the children sleeping in the next rooms, of the stable and happy life he had built. But he also thought of Jennifer, probably experiencing the same insomnia in Cedar Rapids, facing her husband's anger and her own doubts about what to do. The next day during lunch, he received another phone call from Jennifer. This time, her voice was different, more determined. "Kenneth and I fought all night," she said without preamble. "I told him about the letters, about your mother, about the whole misunderstanding. You know what he said?" "What?" "He said he always knew this would happen one day, that he always knew you would come back for me and that he's tired of fighting a ghost." "Jennifer, he gave me an ultimatum, Dennis. Either I forget you completely and never see you again, or he files for separation. There's no middle ground." Dennis's heart raced. "And what are you going to do?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I know Kenneth doesn't deserve this. He's a good man. He's been a good husband. He's a wonderful father. But I also know I can't spend the rest of my life pretending I don't love you." "What about your children?" "They're devastated by the possibility of separation. Brandon asked me if I don't love his father anymore. How do you explain to a 17-year-old boy that there are different kinds of love?" "Maybe we really should stop here," repeated Dennis, although the words hurt even more this time. "Can you?" asked Jennifer directly. "Can you forget me now that you know the truth? Can you go back to your life as if none of this ever happened?" Dennis didn't answer because he couldn't lie. No, he couldn't forget. He couldn't pretend that finding Jennifer again hadn't changed everything. "I can't either," she said softly. "So I need to decide what I'm going to do." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking of telling the boys the truth. The whole truth about our marriage, about why we separated, about how we found each other again. They're teenagers. They're smart. They deserve to know why their family might end." "What if they turn against you?" "It's a risk I'll have to take. But I can't live a lie anymore, Dennis. I've already wasted 25 years of my life because of lies and misunderstandings." After they hung up, Dennis stood still in the middle of the company courtyard, watching his colleagues move about without really seeing anything. He felt as if he were at a crossroads where every direction led to some kind of pain. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. In the afternoon when he arrived home, he found Susan packing clothes in the bedroom. "Are you going on a trip?" he asked. "I'm going to spend a few days at my sister's house," she replied without looking at him. "I need some time to think." "Susan, please, don't do this. Don't abandon our marriage because of..." "Because of what?" she interrupted him, turning to face him. "Because of the woman you could never forget. Because of the love you could never fully give me." "I love you," protested Dennis. "I know you love me," said Susan calmly, "but not the way you love her. And after 20 years of trying to accept that, I'm tired." "What about the children?" "The children will stay with you. Ryan is 18, Ashley is 16. They're old enough to understand that sometimes parents need time to work things out. Please don't leave." Susan stopped packing the suitcase and sat on the bed. For the first time in days, she looked directly into Dennis's eyes. "Do you want me to stay?" she asked. "Do you really? Or are you asking me to stay because you feel guilty?" Dennis opened his mouth to answer, but realized he wasn't sure of the response. He wanted Susan in his life. He wanted the stability of family. He wanted to preserve the life they had built together. But he also wanted Jennifer. Susan read the hesitation on his face. "That's what I thought," she said sadly. "Dennis, you're a good man. You always have been. But you can't love two women at the same time and expect neither of them to get hurt." "So what do I do?" "Decide," replied Susan, going back to packing her suitcase. "Decide once and for all which life you want to live, and then face the consequences of your choice." Susan left that same afternoon. Ryan and Ashley were confused and hurt, but Dennis explained that their parents were going through a difficult time and needed some space to figure things out. "Is it because of that woman?" Ashley asked directly. "The neighbor said she saw you talking to a woman downtown." "It's complicated, honey," answered Dennis. "It has to do with things from the past that I need to sort out." "Are you going to leave Mom?" asked Ryan, with barely contained anger in his voice. "I don't know," admitted Dennis. "I hope not. But I need to be honest with her, and that means figuring out what I truly feel." Ryan left the house, slamming the door. Ashley hugged him before going to her room, but Dennis could tell she was hurt too. That night, alone in the house he had shared with Susan for 20 years, Dennis realized the magnitude of the problem he had created. By trying to resolve a misunderstanding from the past, he was destroying the present. He called Jennifer the next day. "How did the talk with your kids go?" she asked. "Difficult," he replied. "Brandon was furious with me, said I was destroying the family over a high school boyfriend. Emily cried a lot, but she seems to understand the situation better. And Kenneth, he left last night. He's staying temporarily at his mother's apartment. He said he'll only come back if I promise never to speak to you again." "Jennifer, maybe we should—" "I've already decided," she interrupted him. "I'm going to separate from Kenneth." Dennis fell silent, processing the information. "Are you sure about this?" "I am. After I talked to the kids, I realized I can't pretend anymore. It's not fair to Kenneth to live with a woman who loves another man. It's not fair to me to live a life I didn't truly choose. What if I can't leave Susan? What if I decide to stay with my family? Then I'll live alone," Jennifer replied with determination. "But I won't live lying to myself anymore." The strength in Jennifer's voice made Dennis realize she had changed over the last 25 years. The young, insecure woman who had left because of a misunderstanding had become a mature woman who knew what she wanted. "When are you going to talk to Kenneth?" "I already did. I called him this morning and said I want a divorce. He said I was crazy, that I was destroying our children's lives over a romantic fantasy." "Maybe he's right," Dennis said quietly. "Do you think it's a fantasy?" asked Jennifer. "What did you feel when you saw me that day?" Dennis closed his eyes and remembered the moment he saw Jennifer leaving the house to get the mail. The racing heart, the feeling that the world had stopped, the instant recognition that all the feelings he thought he had buried were alive and pulsing. "I felt as if 5 minutes had passed, not 25 years, he admitted. "Then it's not a fantasy," said Jennifer. "It's real. It always has been real." Over the weekend, Dennis was alone with the kids. Ryan barely spoke to him, still hurt by his parents' temporary separation. Ashley tried to maintain normalcy, but he could tell she was worried. On Sunday afternoon, while watching television with Ashley, she asked a question that caught him off guard. "Dad, did you love Mom when you married her?" Dennis thought carefully before answering. "I did love her, honey, I still do. But do you love the other woman more?" "They're different kinds of love," explained Dennis. "I love your mother as a companion, as the mother of my children, as the person who helped me rebuild my life. But Jennifer—" "Jennifer is what?" "Jennifer is the love of my life," admitted Dennis, saying it out loud for the first time. Ashley nodded, as if she expected that answer. "Did Mom know this?" "She did. She always knew. It was very brave of her to agree to marry me even knowing I still loved someone else. And now, are you going to be with Jennifer?" "I don't know, honey. It's a very difficult decision. If I stay with her, I'll hurt you, Ryan, and your mother. If I don't, I'll hurt her and myself." Ashley was thoughtful for a moment. "Dad, can I ask you an adult question?" "Of course." "If you stay with Mom just for our sake, will you be happy?" The question hit Dennis squarely. Ashley, at 16, had asked the question he had been avoiding asking himself. "Probably not," he answered honestly. "And if you're not happy, will you be able to make us happy?" Dennis looked at his daughter with admiration. When had she become so wise? "Probably not either." "Then maybe you should do what makes you happy," said Ashley, "even if it's hard for everyone at first." That night, Dennis called Susan at her sister's house. "How are things there?" she asked. "Difficult," admitted Dennis. Ryan is angry, Ashley is worried, I'm lost. And Jennifer? She's separating from her husband. Susan was silent for a long moment. And you? Have you decided what you're going to do? Not yet, but I think I'm close to a decision. May I ask what decision? Dennis took a deep breath. I think I'm going to ask for a divorce, Susan. Even expecting that answer, Susan seemed dejected. Why? Because it's not fair to you to stay married to a man who loves another woman. Because it's not fair to me to live pretending I can ignore my feelings. And because it's not fair to our children to grow up in a home where the parents aren't truly happy. Dennis, are you sure about this? Really sure? I'm not sure about anything, he admitted. I only know I can't keep pretending anymore. You deserve a man who loves you completely, not someone who is always comparing you to someone else. And what if it doesn't work out with Jennifer? What if after all this you find out your love only worked as a fantasy? It's a risk I'll have to take. Susan sighed deeply. I always knew this day would come. I always knew that if she came back I would lose you. Susan, you never lost me. Part of me will always love you. You are the mother of my children, you were my companion for 20 years, that will never change. But it's not enough, is it? Not for a marriage. You deserve more. The following week, Dennis sought out a lawyer to discuss the terms of the divorce. He wanted to be fair to Susan, to ensure she kept the house, that she had financial security, that the children wouldn't be harmed. Jennifer did the same thing in Cedar Rapids. They talked on the phone every day, planning what life would be like after the official separations. Are you going to move here? Asked Jennifer. I don't know yet, replied Dennis. I need to sort things out with my children first. I don't want them to feel I abandoned them to be with you. I understand. Brandon and Emily are still getting used to the idea of the separation. Emily asks about you a lot, wants to know what you're like, what our marriage was like. And what do you tell her? The truth. That you were always the kindest and most caring man I've ever known. That we were happy together until that stupid misunderstanding separated us. Do you think we can be happy again? After so many years, with so much changed? I don't know, admitted Jennifer, but I want to try. I want to find out if what I still feel for you is real or just nostalgia. 1 month after the reunion in the square, Dennis and Susan met at her lawyer's office to sign the separation papers. Susan was serene, resigned. She had cried everything she had to cry in the last few weeks. Did you ever regret it? She asked before they signed the documents. Marrying you? Never, Dennis answered sincerely. You gave me the best 20 years of my life. You gave me 2 wonderful children. You taught me what it means to have a family. But I can't pretend anymore that I'm happy with just that. Susan nodded and signed the papers. Dennis did the same. When they left the office, Susan hugged him on the sidewalk. Be happy, she said. Be truly happy this time. You too, replied Dennis. You deserve to find someone who loves you the way you deserve to be loved. 2 months later, Jennifer and Kenneth officially finalized their divorce. Kenneth had accepted the situation more easily than she expected. In their last conversation, he admitted he was tired of competing with the memory of Dennis. I tried, Jennifer, he said. I tried to make you love me like you loved him. But I think some loves are unique in a person's life. Kenneth, you are a wonderful man. You'll find someone who loves you completely. And you will find out if it was worth waiting 25 years for a second chance. Brandon had partially reconciled with his mother, though he was still hurt by the separation. Emily had accepted the situation better and showed curiosity about meeting Dennis. When is he going to come visit us? And she would always ask. Soon, Jennifer would answer, when he sorts things out with his children. Ryan had taken longer to accept his parents' separation, but after some long and honest talks with Dennis, he began to understand that sometimes people need to make difficult decisions to be truly happy. Ashley, surprisingly, was the one who most openly supported her father's decision. If you're happier this way, then you did the right thing, she said, even if it's hard for us to accept. 3 months after the reunion in the square, Dennis finally visited Jennifer in Cedar Rapids. This time, he didn't need to hide or make excuses. He arrived at her house on a Saturday afternoon, as nervous as a teenager on a first date. Jennifer opened the door wearing a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes. She was nervous too, but smiling. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi," he replied. They looked at each other for a moment, still trying to believe they could finally be together without hiding or feeling guilty. Emily appeared behind her mother, curious to meet the man who had caused so much change in their lives. "You're Dennis," she said, sizing him up with her clever eyes. "That's me," confirmed Dennis, bending down to be at the girl's level. "You're Emily. Your mother has talked a lot about you." "She's talked a lot about you too," Emily replied. "Always." Brandon appeared later, still a bit reserved but polite. He greeted Dennis coolly and soon retreated to his room. "He'll get used to it," said Jennifer. "He just needs time." They spent the afternoon talking in the living room, catching up on the years they had lost. Dennis talked about his children, about his work, about what his life with Susan had been like. Jennifer talked about her teaching career, about raising the children, about the ups and downs of her marriage with Kenneth. "You've changed," Dennis observed. "How so?" "You're stronger, more decisive." "The Jennifer I knew wouldn't have had the courage to leave her husband to be with me." 25 years teach you a lot," Jennifer replied, "especially about not wasting chances to be happy." In the late afternoon, Dennis was getting ready to return to Cedar Falls when Jennifer asked a question that caught him off guard. "Do you want to try again?" she asked directly. "Do you want to try a serious relationship, not just sporadic dates?" Dennis looked at her, at the house where she had built a life with another man, at the children who had been born from another relationship. "I do," he replied, "but I don't know how to make it work. I live in one town, you live in another. We have children to raise, responsibilities." "We can figure it out together," said Jennifer. "If we really want to be together, we'll find a way." It was Emily who offered the most practical solution to the problem. A few weeks later, during a phone call, she asked Dennis, "Why don't you come live here with us?" "In Cedar Rapids?" asked Dennis, surprised by the suggestion. "Here in our house," Emily specified. "Mom is happy when she talks to you, and the house is big, there's room." Dennis was touched by the girl's invitation, but he knew the decision wasn't that simple. What about Brandon? Would he agree to that? "Brandon is starting college next year," said Emily pragmatically. "He'll be leaving home anyway, and he already said he just wants to see Mom happy." The idea was tempting, but Dennis knew it would mean leaving Cedar Falls, leaving his job, starting a completely new life at 53. He talked about it with Ryan and Ashley during a Sunday lunch. "Are you thinking of moving to Cedar Rapids?" asked Ryan. "It's a possibility, but only if you two are okay with it. I don't want you to feel I'm abandoning you." "Dad, Cedar Rapids is 30 miles from here," Ashley reminded him. "It's not like you're moving to Japan." "You could visit us on weekends," suggested Ryan, who seemed to be warming to the idea. "And we could go visit you too." "Are you sure you'd be okay?" "We'll miss you," Ashley admitted, "but you seem happier since you reconnected with Jennifer, and we want you to be happy." 6 months after the reunion, Dennis made the bravest decision of his life. He quit his job in Cedar Falls, sold the house he had shared with Susan, and moved to Cedar Rapids. Jennifer welcomed him with tears in her eyes and a smile that lit up the whole house. "Welcome home," she said, hugging him at the door. "Finally," replied Dennis. The adjustment wasn't easy. Brandon remained distant for a few weeks, still processing his parents' separation and Dennis's presence in the house. Emily, on the other hand, adopted Dennis almost immediately, asking questions about his life, asking for help with homework, including him in family activities. Dennis got a job with a municipal sanitation company in Cedar Rapids, starting over as a regular employee at 53. He didn't mind. After so many years working out of obligation, doing something by choice made all the difference. Visits from Ryan and Ashley became regular. Gradually, the 4 young people, Ryan, Ashley, Brandon, and Emily, began to get to know each other and form bonds of friendship that surprised the adults. Susan also visited them a few times, maintaining a cordial relationship with Jennifer. On the first visit, the two women talked at length in the kitchen while Dennis played with the children in the living room. "You took good care of him all those years," Jennifer said to Susan. "I did the best I could," Susan replied, "but I always knew a part of him belonged to you. Thank you for understanding when he decided to come back to me." "You two were meant to be," Susan said simply. "I was just an interlude in your story." 1 year after moving to Cedar Rapids, Dennis and Jennifer got married again. The ceremony was simple, held in the same church where they had married 28 years earlier in Cedar Falls. Susan was present, accompanied by a new boyfriend she had recently met. Kenneth also attended, wishing happiness to the former couple. Ryan served as Dennis's best man, Brandon as Jennifer's. Ashley and Emily were bridesmaids. "This time it will work out," murmured Emily to Ashley during the ceremony. "How can you be sure?" asked Ashley. "Because now they know what they almost lost," Emily replied wisely. During the reception, Dennis gave an emotional speech. "Some people think true love is finding the right person on the first try," he said, looking at Jennifer. "But I believe true love is fighting for someone even when all seems lost. It's forgiving misunderstandings, overcoming obstacles, facing criticism. It's choosing the same person every day, even after 25 years apart." Jennifer cried throughout the entire speech. "I almost gave up," she said, when it was her turn to speak. "I almost accepted that our love was in the past. But fate had other plans. Sometimes fate uses strange methods to correct the mistakes of the past. In our case, it used a yellow bag floating in the river." Everyone laughed, remembering the unusual story that had brought the couple back together. "Now we know what we have is real," Jennifer continued. "It withstood 25 years of separation, marriages to other people, interference from others, time, distance. If that's not true love, then I don't know what is." 5 years after the wedding, Dennis and Jennifer were sitting on the porch of the house in Cedar Rapids, watching Emily play in the yard with Ryan's children as he had recently married. "Do you regret anything?" asked Jennifer. "Only one thing," replied Dennis. "What?" "Not having had the courage to look for you sooner. We wasted many years." "They weren't wasted," said Jennifer. "We raised wonderful children, learned about life, became better people. Maybe we weren't ready to be together before." "You think so?" "I do. The 28-year-old Dennis might not have had the courage to face his family to be with me. The 25-year-old Jennifer might have been too young to forgive and fight for the relationship." "And now?" "Now we know the value of what we have," said Jennifer, taking Dennis's hand. "We know that time is precious, that true love is rare, that we don't always get second chances." "Or third chances," Dennis reminded with a smile. "Or third chances." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out, now continuing. That night, as Jennifer slept beside him, Dennis thought about the strange sequence of events that had led to their reunion. If he hadn't worked on that river on that specific day, if the yellow bag hadn't gotten stuck exactly in that spot, if he hadn't been curious enough to open the object, how many lives were changed by those wet letters? His, Jennifer's, Susan's, Kenneth's, all of their children's. A seemingly insignificant event had created a domino effect that transformed multiple families. And at the center of it all was his mother's interference 25 years ago. Mrs. Dorothy could never have imagined that her actions would have such lasting consequences. She probably sincerely believed she was protecting her son from an unsuitable woman. Dennis had forgiven his mother, understanding she had acted out of misguided love, but he couldn't help wondering what his life would have been like if the letters had reached their destination. Would he have reconciled with Jennifer back then? Would they have been happy together? Would they have had children? Would Ryan and Ashley have been born? Would Susan have found another love? There was no way to know, and perhaps it was better that way. The important thing was that despite all the obstacles and misunderstandings, love had prevailed in the end. 2 years later, Dennis received an unexpected phone call. It was his cousin who lived in Cedar Rapids, the one who had helped him locate Jennifer. "Man, you won't believe what happened," said the excited cousin. "Remember the story about the letters you found in the river? Well, I found out how they ended up there." Dennis's heart raced. "How?" Do you remember Mrs. Dorothy, your mother? She used to come to my house sometimes when you were married to your first wife. Well, my mother found some old notes of hers last week while she was organizing some old papers. What kind of notes? A sort of diary where she wrote about her worries for you. There's an entry where she says she threw some letters in the river because she thought it would be better for you to forget the past. Dennis fell silent, processing the information. Did she write exactly where she threw the letters? She did. At the old bridge near the center of Cedar Falls. She said she threw them several times over about 2 years, always when she came to visit you and brought the letters that had arrived in the mail. Several times? According to the notes, she kept some letters at home, but threw most of them in the river. She thought if you never saw them, you'd never be tempted to reply. Dennis told Jennifer about his cousin's call that same night. So it wasn't just an accident that you found those letters, she said thoughtfully. There must be dozens of other letters still at the bottom of the river. Probably, agreed Dennis. My mother threw letters away for at least 2 years, according to my cousin. Do you want to go look? Asked Jennifer. See if you can find more letters. Dennis thought about the proposal. It would be interesting to read all the letters Jennifer had written, to fully understand her feelings during those years of separation. But it would also be painful to relive all that suffering. No, he finally decided. The past has already taught us what we needed to learn. Now it's time to live in the present. Jennifer smiled and kissed him softly. You're right. We've already wasted too much time looking back. But Emily, who had overheard the conversation by chance, was fascinated by the idea of the lost letters in the river. Imagine how many stories must be at the bottom of that river, she said during dinner. Not just your letters, but letters from other people that were thrown there over all these years. That's true, agreed Brandon, who had become interested in the conversation. There must be love letters, farewell letters, secrets people wanted to hide. How about we start a project? Emily suggested excitedly. We could organize a river cleanup and catalog everything we find, like a museum of lost stories. Dennis and Jennifer exchanged glances, amused by the girls' enthusiasm. It would be interesting, admitted Jennifer, but it would also be an invasion of privacy. Those letters weren't written to be read by strangers. But if they're abandoned in the river, they've already lost their privacy anyway, argued Emily. And maybe some stories deserve to be known, like yours. Emily's idea planted a seed in Dennis's head. In the following days, he caught himself thinking about other stories that might be hidden at the bottom of the river in Cedar Falls. A week later, he decided to visit the town where he was born and raised. Not to look for letters, but to revisit the places that had marked his life. He went first to the bridge, where his mother had thrown Jennifer's letters. The river was lower due to the drought, and it was possible to see rocks and objects at the bottom more clearly. He wasn't specifically looking for letters, but he couldn't help looking. And that's when he saw something that made him stop. Wedged between 2 large rocks, there was a small rusty metal box. The kind of box people use to store important items. Without thinking much, Dennis went down to the riverbank and managed to reach the box. It was very rusty, but still closed. Inside the box were old photographs, some letters, and a small diary. Everything belonged to a woman named Eleanor, who apparently had lived in Cedar Falls in the 1960s. From the photographs and letters, Dennis deduced that Eleanor had had a love affair with a married man. The diary revealed an intense personal drama, full of passion, guilt, and suffering. The last diary entry was dated August 1967. I can't carry this weight anymore. Harold chose to stay with his wife, and I need to let him go. I'm throwing our correspondence in the river, so no one else suffers because of it. Perhaps one day someone will find these letters and understand that not all loves are possible, but that doesn't make them any less true. Dennis was moved by Eleanor's story. That woman had lived a drama similar to his, 50 years earlier. She had loved someone she couldn't have and had chosen to protect that love by throwing the evidence into the river. He decided to look for information about Eleanor in town. He discovered she had been a teacher at the local school, never married, and died in the 80s without leaving any family. But he found one of Eleanor's former students, Mrs. Margaret, who still lived in Cedar Falls. Eleanor Mitchell, recalled Mrs. Margaret when Dennis mentioned the name. My, it's been so long. She was a wonderful teacher, but always seemed a bit sad, as if she carried some secret. Do you know if she had any romantic relationship? Well, there were always rumors about her and Harold Patterson, who was married and had children, but no one ever confirmed anything. Eleanor was very discreet. Is Harold still alive? No, Harold passed away about 10 years ago, but his widow still lives here. Mrs. Helen. She must be almost 90 now. Dennis hesitated. Would it be right to seek out Harold's widow to talk about a 50-year-old adultery story? But something compelled him to close the cycle of Eleanor's story. He looked for Mrs. Helen on a Thursday afternoon. She lived in a small house in the town centre, cared for by a granddaughter. Harold Patterson was my husband, confirmed Mrs. Helen, when Dennis introduced himself. Why do you want to know about him? Dennis explained about the box found in the river, about Eleanor's letters. Mrs. Helen listened in silence, showing no surprise. I always knew about Eleanor, she finally said. Harold wasn't good at hiding secrets, but he was a good husband and a good father. The affair with her lasted about 2 years in the late 60s. Weren't you angry? At the time I was, of course, but it was a different time, different mindsets. Women didn't have the options they have today. I stayed with Harold because of the children, and he decided to stay with me. Eleanor understood and stepped away. And after that? After that, we never talked about it again. Harold took that secret to the grave. I always wondered what had happened to Eleanor, if she had been happy. Dennis told her about what he had discovered in Eleanor's diary, about how she had sacrificed herself to preserve Harold's family. That's what I imagined, said Mrs. Helen, her eyes moist. Eleanor was always an honourable woman. Even loving my husband, she never tried to destroy our family. Would you like to see the letters, read the diary? Mrs. Helen thought for a long moment. No, she finally decided. Some stories are better kept in the heart, but I'm glad to know Eleanor never hated me, that she understood my situation too. Back in Cedar Rapids, Dennis told Jennifer about encountering Eleanor's story. It's amazing how rivers hold so many stories, commented Jennifer, and how love can take so many different forms. Eleanor gave up love to preserve a family. We destroyed 2 families to be together. Which of the 2 choices was the right one? Both, answered Jennifer without hesitation. Eleanor did what she thought was right in her time with the options she had. We did what we thought was right in our time with the options we had. Do you think we made the right choice? Jennifer looked around the room where they lived, where they had built a new family with the children from both previous marriages. Ryan had brought the grandchildren to visit them over the weekend. Ashley was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Brandon was studying for his college entrance exams in his room. Emily was drawing at the living room table. Look around us, she said. Everyone has found their place. Susan is happy with her new boyfriend. Kenneth is dating a really nice woman he met at work. Our children get along well with each other. We are happy together. But it cost a lot to get here. The best loves always come at a high price, said Jennifer. The difference is that some cost so much they're not worth it. Ours was costly, but every sacrifice was worth it. 3 months after the meeting with Mrs. Helen, Dennis received an unexpected call. It was Mrs. Helen's granddaughter. My grandmother passed away last week, said the young woman. Before she left, she asked me to look for you. She said you would understand the message. What message? She said for you to return Elena's letters to the river. She said some stories need to stay where they are, protected by water and time. Dennis understood perfectly. The following Saturday, he traveled to Cedar Falls with Jennifer and the children. Together, they returned Eleanor's box to the river, at the same spot where she had thrown the letters 50 years earlier. Why are we doing this? Asked Emily, curious. Because not all stories need to have a public ending, explained Dennis. Some are better kept as secrets between the people who lived them. And our story? Asked Brandon. Should it be a secret too? Our story is different, said Jennifer. Our story had a happy ending, so it can be shared. Eleanor's story had an ending of sacrifice, so it deserves to be respected. As the box slowly sank into the river waters, Dennis felt as if he were closing a cycle. He had found his own story in that river, and now he was returning someone else's story to the same place. Do you think they'll find our letters too someday? asked Emily. Probably, answered Dennis. And when they do, I hope they understand that true love sometimes needs to fight impossible obstacles to survive. 5 years after that episode, Dennis was celebrating his 60th birthday, surrounded by the family he had built over his lifetime. Susan was there with her new husband, a kind man who made her smile genuinely. Kenneth had also attended with his girlfriend. All the children were there. Ryan with his wife and 3 small children, Ashley with her fiancé, Brandon with his first serious girlfriend, Emily, now a teenager, full of plans for the future. "I'd like to make a toast," said Dennis when they were all gathered around the table, "to all of you who have been part of my journey. To those who were with me from the beginning, to those who arrived along the way, and to those who joined at the end." "And to the River Letters?" asked Emily, who at 18 was still fascinated by the story of her parents' reunion. "And to the River Letters," agreed Dennis, raising his glass, "because sometimes fate uses the most unexpected methods to correct the mistakes of the past." "And to second chances," added Jennifer. "And to second chances," everyone repeated in unison. Later, when the guests had left and the house was quiet, Dennis and Jennifer sat on the porch to watch the sunset. "If you could go back in time," asked Jennifer, "would you change anything?" "I would change my mother's interference," replied Dennis without hesitation. "But I wouldn't change anything else. Even the years we spent apart, even the marriages to other people. All of that brought us here. To this porch, in this house, at this age, with this crazy family we've put together." "Exactly. And I wouldn't trade it for anything." When darkness took over the sky and the first stars began to appear, Dennis thought about the entire journey that had begun on that hot afternoon when he found a yellow bag in the river. A seemingly insignificant discovery had changed multiple lives, reunited a couple separated by misunderstandings, created a new family, and taught lessons about forgiveness, about courage, about the importance of fighting for what truly matters. "You know what amazes me most about this whole story?" said Jennifer, interrupting his thoughts. "What?" "If you didn't work in sanitation, if you weren't a person who cares about cleaning the rivers, you would never have found those letters. It was your own character, your own dedication to your work, that created the opportunity for the reunion." Dennis had never thought of it that way. It was true. If he were a person who didn't care about the environment, if he weren't dedicated to his job, if he hadn't gone to the river on that specific day. "Fortune favors the bold," he said, repeating a saying he had learned from his father. "And those with a pure heart," added Jennifer, "because you could have found the letters and decided not to look for me. You could have kept the secret to yourself to avoid complicating your life. It never crossed my mind to do that." "I know, and that's why you deserved a second chance to be happy." That night, before sleeping, Dennis wrote in a small journal he had started keeping since reuniting with Jennifer. "Today, I turned 60 years old and celebrated 10 years of marriage for the second time with Jennifer. I've learned that true love is not just a feeling, it's a choice we make every day. It's the courage to fight against adversity, to forgive mistakes, to start over when necessary. I've learned that sometimes we lose people for silly reasons, but it's never too late to correct the mistakes of the past as long as we have the humility to admit our errors and the courage to face the consequences of our choices. I've learned that family isn't just who you're born with, but who chooses to stay together. Susan will always be part of my family because she helped me become who I am today. Kenneth will always be part of Jennifer's family because he took care of her when I wasn't present. Our children became siblings not by blood but by affection. And I've learned that some loves are like rivers. They can be diverted, they can encounter obstacles, they may even dry up temporarily, but they always find a way back to their natural course." End of story. We know that stories like this touch our feelings deeply and make us reflect on our own lives. Now we want to know what you thought of this emotional journey of Dennis and Jennifer. Do you believe they made the right decision to leave their spouses to be together? Or do you think they should have kept that love as a memory of the past? Leave your honest opinion in the comments because we love reading what you think. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss other emotional stories like this one. Thank you very much for your company and see you in the next story.